Hi, I'm Tim Bradner with Alaska Legislative Digest, and welcome to Capitol Views. We're here today with newly elected Senator Roger Holland of District N, the Hillside District in Anchorage, and welcome. Thanks for joining us, Senator.
Thanks so much for having me aboard.
Just to start out, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your background. How long you've been in Alaska, how long in the district, what sort of work you've done in your career.
My training, I was a field biologist. My wife and I had the opportunity to come to Alaska pursuing her work in 2009. We thought, man, when do you get a chance to live in Alaska? So we came to Alaska in 2009, and I had to kind of abandon field biology. I took a job with DOT's Weights and Measures Lab, and I did that for about 10 years. What was the rest of that question?
Well, just how long you've lived in the district, and
we moved into the district in District N in 2012.
Yeah, and maybe a little bit about where you're from and where you grew up.
Born and raised in New Orleans. My wife and I are both from the same small town of Marrero. We married. We moved to Lafayette, Louisiana in '91, where our daughters Chloe and Sarah were born. And we packed up the family, moved to Alaska in 2009.
I'm just curious, your training was in biology. What motivated you to change careers? Why did you?
I've gone through a few careers changes through life. Granted, this is another one, a state senator. I never aspired to public office. It was just I found myself in late 2019 kind of being disenfranchised with where I saw things going in Juneau. I got to Alaska in 2009, and I was a little bit too gray of hair to convince them that I could tranquilize polar bears and whatnot. So I accepted a lab job happily with DOT's Weights and Measures Lab and did metrology. And if you can do numbers, you can do metrology. It's all about weights and measures and fair, equitable commerce in Alaska.
Yeah, what is and you worked in Anchorage in the Weights and Measures office?
Yeah.
Why is that important? That office important in the function of what DOT does in that area?
So there's about 17,000 commercially important devices in Alaska that have to do with fair and equitable commerce. And it's everything from the scales at your local grocery store to the 40 or 50 scales in your typical Walmart, and about the fuel pumps at your local gas stations and the fuel pumps at the refineries. All of those devices have to be tested for accuracy to be both fair to the customer and fair to the vendor. Strangely enough, as these devices age, they become less efficient to the expense of the vendor. It's in the business's best interest to get their scales and their volume devices checked.
So this is making sure you get an accurate measurement of when you buy your groceries and you weigh your produce that the scale works as expected.
Yeah, when you buy a pound of meat in the deli at your local grocery store, you want to make sure you get a pound of meat. When you buy 5 gallons of gas at the fuel pump, you want to make sure you get 5 gallons of gas. And so there's about a dozen weights and measures inspectors that crawl all over the state looking for all these devices. And there's a few, they call them metrologists, weights and measures scientists that work in the state Metrology Lab. And they basically, they calibrate all the devices that the inspectors carry, and they calibrate devices for industry and other state agencies.
Well, a lot of us, we're so used to the ordinary doing business in life as it goes along, we don't think about a lot of those things, how important it is to have accurate measurements.
Oh, yes, it's like a small change, the inaccuracy of like 0.1 or 0.01 on a scale and in a deli can mean hundreds of dollars lost to the customer or the vendor over the time of a year. I mean, there's just, contact the state Metrology Lab. They'll be glad to provide you the information. It's amazing how these small changes, these small increments build up over time.
Well, I'd also be interested in just your interest in particular fields and Juneau, what committees you're on, have you developed any particular focus on legislation yet?
I am becoming immersed in education. I chair the education committee, and I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the education committee. It's one of our big budget items in the annual budget, and it's also for everything we spend, Alaska spends more per student than most people in the United States. And sadly, our performance doesn't reflect that. We're having a hard time getting the best bang for our buck. And I look forward to trying to help out with that. I'm a vice chair on Labor and Commerce. I'm also on State Affairs, and I'm on Joint Armed Services Committee. And we just started receiving assignments for the finance subcommittees. I'll be on the Education and Public Safety and one other finance subcommittee, and I forget which one it is at the moment. I just got that list like on Friday.
Well, with the 20-member Senate, I mean, you're going to get a crash course in different agencies and the real details. I'm just thinking one of the big challenges in education we have is the student. We've lost the attention of a lot of students during the virtual learning cycle, and how we get that back, and how we can. I know that's coming up in the committee, and there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. So you've certainly got some challenges.
And there's a steep learning curve, no pun intended, about education in Alaska and the foundation funding formula. And there's some crazy intricacies on how when students left the brick and mortar classrooms and went into the virtual learning environment, how that's affected in the foundation funding formula. And so we're looking at all that. And like I said, no pun intended, it's a steep learning curve, but I think we're making great progress.
Well, there's definitely some winners and losers in the foundation formula this year with the switches to correspondence and the differentials in payments to school districts for correspondence, versus some school districts have come out pretty well and others haven't. So it's definitely a mixed bag.
And it's all about getting our kids educated and getting the best education we can for the money we spend.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Senator Holland, for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you in Juneau physically at some point, past COVID, and look forward to talking with you more.
Thanks so much for having me.